thank you for joining us here on Public Affairs. I'm your host. My name is John Peterson. We have a program for you today that's going to be extremely interesting, especially if you live in Marion. I have with me here Larry Strickland from the Central Christian Church, and he's going to be talking about the church and its heritage value. And also, I have and one of the central features of that is the stained glass windows in the sanctuary. And we have with us the artist who created those windows. And so this is going to be a very, very enriching discussion here. And Larry, I thank you very much for being with us. And so introduce to us the King Mansion itself and Central Christian Church and how that all ties together and how that has value in Marion.
Okay, the King Mansion was built by George King. He was one of the engineers, owners, president of what then was the Marion Steam Shovel and eventually turned to be the Marion Power Shovel. And the Marion Power Shovel back in the 60s built 2 transport crawlers that are one still used today to move rockets from the assembly building out to the launch pad. George King, back in 1909, I believe, started his concept of building this mansion. He engaged an architect in Pennsylvania, sent him to Europe to look at a couple buildings that he wanted some of that architecture design in his building in Marion, Ohio. The building was built, the Kings lived in it, and George passed away, and Mrs. King and the family stayed there. Eventually, the oldest daughter was going to get married to Mr. Brown. Mrs. King said she would give the blessing to the wedding if they would stay in the mansion. At that point, the mansion was kind of divided. The east side was the King side, the west side was the Brown. Sometime after that, the Kings moved out. The Browns were in the process of having a conventional house built in the Mount Vernon Heights area and put the mansion up for sale. At that time, about mid-1940s, the Central Christian Church bought the mansion at a very good price, and within 2 years paid off the loan for the mansion and began to design a structure in the back of the building, which we call the sanctuary. And at that point, went through a couple different versions of windows, and eventually Dick Barnhart came up with the concept of these stained glass windows. Now the windows are unique in their design, that they're about 3 feet wide and 15 feet tall, very skinny and tall. And then I'll let Dave go into the design of number 1 window, which represents the birth of Christ.
Well, one of the most interesting parts about the windows, we designed them so that it was the story of Christ's life. Beginning on the east window, the first window that you see on the left side is the birth, and then the windows progress from one side of the church sanctuary to the other, all the way to the front, where the Ascension window and the Pentecost window are. So we're kind of telling the story of Christ in stained glass windows. Stained glass windows traditionally have told biblical stories, so it's very much in keeping with the tradition of stained glass over the centuries. The windows themselves being 3 feet wide and 15 feet tall, I mean, how do you make a picture that's this narrow and that tall? You know, I mean, it's very difficult to do. Consequently, the designs were very simple. They had to be. You just didn't want to have all this busyness going on, you know. And when I talked to Dick Barnhart, he was wonderful to work with on this whole project. He liked the simplicity of the Bible pictures in News for Modern Man, Good News for Modern Man. It's kind of a modern version of the Bible. They speak in a little more plain language, and the illustrations were very simple, and they really lended themselves to working in glass. Glass, for anybody that's ever tried to cut glass, it doesn't go the way that people draw pictures all the time. It has a mind of its own, so
Yeah.
you have to work with the glass. The glass that we used was really, really easy to work with. In that it's a Blanco it's a hand-blown glass made in Blanco, West Virginia. And the only difficulty with working with Blanco is the thickness of it. And so consequently, the lead lines in the lead that you used had to be wide enough to accommodate very thick glass, because Blanco, while they make beautiful colors, they can't control the thickness very well. The European glass makers are much better at that. Consequently, that was another design limitation. So all of the horizontal lines in the windows are done with very wide lead, which allows the cames to separate enough that the thicker glass can fit down inside the pieces. So, and then Blanco doesn't make a full spectrum of colors. So we had to use some other kinds of glass, but it would still work.
So I'm listening to you tell the story, and I get this marvelous thought in my head here that the ancient cathedrals, primarily in Europe, they were paintings, and it would be the painting of, it's like the entire Bible in picture form when you would go around the ceiling, and just because the people there were illiterate, because we didn't have educational systems, and so this is that same thing. This is the same feature where you can, if you understand, and the minister will lead you to that this is like those Gothic cathedrals in terms of the Bible in picture form.
Absolutely. And if you study the old ancient windows, they all tell biblical stories. Most of the time, each window depicts a certain saint.
Yeah.
You know, we were talking in the one window at Central Christian, the chalice on the Pentecost window. There's a chalice
Yes.
with a cross
Yes.
in it, and that is the cross, the chalice of St. Andrew, and he was the patron saint of disciples and the laity. Consequently, it's an ideal symbol to use in a Pentecost window, because that is when the Spirit of Christ came back to earth, and it was really the founding of the modern church.
Yes.
And that made one of the things that I find very fascinating about working with church windows is all the research in the symbolism. It's really very interesting. Ran across a book in the Marian Library called Symbols, the Modern Language. And it was made by a woman that obviously had no life at all if she looked up the meaning of all this stuff. I mean, it's a thick book, and it's got thousands of explanations of what these symbols are. Mm-hmm. And I think, boy, she'd be interesting to run into in a cocktail party.
You know, one thing I noticed here, Larry, as Dave is explaining this, that everybody who lives in Marion knows the Marion Power Shovel. They might not have known that George King, the president, and the brainchild, if you will, that Marion Power Shovel being the brainchild of him, may not know that that the mansion he built is still here. Yep. And it was, and Central Christian Church is just a build onto that, and this marvelous art that Dave is talking about is on display in the windows in Central Christian Church, by the man who was the brainchild of Mary Potter Shovel. I don't think enough people understand that to understand the heritage value that we're talking about here.
Now, one of the things that most people won't realize, Dave, typically, what did it take from the time you designed it, drew the pictures, said this is what I want to build, how long would it take for each window? Now, remember, we'd had 10 of these for Dave to do, and he did an excellent job. But just so that people understand, this is not something you turn the crank and it comes right out, okay?
This is art.
This is art, and it takes a while. So how long would it take, average, to do a window?
Oh, it really depends on the number of pieces of glass in the window.
Yeah, but for an average.
It really depends, and it's been so long since I've made these. I really know. I had to get help. I hired a young man from Tri Rivers in their, I guess it was their work study program that they had, and he worked with me to build these windows. Being as you have to think about the logistics of how you actually make these windows too. When you're letting these windows together, they're all these loose pieces of glass laying on a table, and you put a piece of lead in between each one, and then you solder all the joints, where the lead comes together, but you have to flip the window over, and there's nothing holding it together. So the way that we did it, we cut 2 pieces of plywood. Each one of these windows is approximately 7.5 feet long. A sheet of plywood's 8. You can't make a window bigger than you can build a table for it to work on. So what we did was we got 2 pieces of plywood. We slid the window off of the workbench on to the other piece of plywood, put another piece of plywood on top, flipped the window over on the workbench, and slid the window off.
So what we're seeing,
solder the other side.
What we're seeing here, folks, is the genius that went into the making of the window, and that building where these stained glass windows are is in our city, and a lot of people don't know that. I hope and pray that the people who watch this video can appreciate the value of that and the art form and the labor and what we're talking about here.
Yeah, just the fact that the windows are such an odd shape, the installation was a challenge, I'm sure.
Oh, well, and when we put the windows in, the church was not air conditioned, and so the windows had to open. And we talked about double hung sashes that go up and down, and that is really complicated. The old folks did it, but we're not accustomed to that. And besides that, when you slide the double hung windows up, it transposes 2 images over each other.
Yes.
And it ruins the artwork in it. And so what we did was we hinged them at the bottom so that the windows would tilt in, and put chains on either side, so that if you notice when you come to the church on the church tour Saturday, there's a latch at the top of that bottom sash and the hinge at the bottom, so the window will open. We only had one of them fall.
So Larry, let me ask you this. Dave just mentioned something that the viewer needs to know, that they can come to the church and they can see these things. There's going to be like an open house or a display, a time, and when is that?
Now, this December 9th, on a Saturday, from 5 to 8 o'clock, the church will be open because the Downtown Association is having a church tour, and ours is in the part of the tour. But we will be open for those who just want to come to look at the windows. We have designed a luminary system where we light the outside of the windows. So when you're standing inside, it's pitch black outside, you're going to see the windows in most vivid color that you can imagine.
Wow. Wow. So, Dave, I interrupted you before. I didn't want to interrupt you for the description of the art and all that. But I thought when people find out that they could look at it, I wanted to make sure that they knew when they could come back.
Yeah. And last year, the guys did a fabulous job of lighting the windows. And they were absolutely gorgeous when you walk into the sanctuary. And they did a beautiful job decorating the sanctuary, put lights down the aisleways, and it was just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, we had little artificial lights, like teacup lights, but they were LEDs. I think we had a couple hundred of those spread out through the sanctuary. One member of the church, I won't use her name, started crying. So it is very breathtaking.
It was gorgeous. It was gorgeous.
So isn't it interesting? You have the breathtaking value of, well, first of all, the building itself, the breathtaking value of the story of Christ's life, and you have the breathtaking value of the art that went into the windows and also the lighting. And so these are multiple layers of marvelous, ingenious work here. And all of that can be seen on Saturday if they can come. And is it free?
Oh,
Yeah, they can come into their church and look at the lights, and the word is free. Stay as long as necessary. Sit in the pew and contemplate where you are in life.
Yes.
I'll be there, and if you want to talk directly to me, that'd be great. And another thing about the building itself, the King Mansion itself, that just always knocks me out because I'm kind of a student of history a little bit. Henry Ford and Thomas Edison and
Firestone.
Harvey Firestone, they used to travel around, and especially when President Harding was president, they traveled to Marion quite often, and they stayed in the King Mansion when they were visiting. And so very rarely do I ever walk in those front doors of that church that I don't think that those three men, really titans of the United States
Yes.
in those days. They were famous. Al Jolson came, there's photos of him in the yard. The history involved with the King Mansion has always just absolutely blown me away.
Yeah, we have a picture of the Firestone and Edison and Ford underneath one of the balconies.
Yeah.
And those who would be interested, we can show you where it's at, and you can get your picture
Yeah.
underneath the balcony with those three gentlemen. They won't be there, but you can be there.
Yes. Yes. So the thing that strikes me about all this is, we're talking about something like it's a building and glass and whatever, but it's way more than that. That Marion was put on the map by industry and rail. And this is, we have the Harding Memorial, we have the birthplace in Caledonia and all that stuff, but the art, the value, and what Dave was saying earlier, the titans of industry. Firestone and these titans of industry came here and stayed in that mansion, which they will be, the viewer can walk into Saturday, the December the 9th, right?
Yes.
So we have an incredible piece of heritage here that you can walk in for free and see. And and you told us that on the 9th, when the folks is going to be open, the people are going to be coming, the very creator of the art form for these windows itself is going to be there, and I'm sure you're looking forward to telling them. I'm just struck by the value of this thing that we're talking about.
Well, in these windows, it's something that is, it kind of, as a person that makes windows like this, it's a little difficult to understand that these windows will be there for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
As long as the building is standing, the windows, they don't deteriorate.
Yes.
We still have windows in Europe that are hundreds of years old. The glass doesn't deteriorate, the lead will. And you can take those old windows apart, put new lead in between each piece of glass, and they're virtually just like they were when they were first made. These windows, I was away for about 20 years. I have two lives. One is my life before Dallas, and one is a life, I made a lot of windows in Dallas, but I came back here 6 years ago because it's my home. And one of the first things I did when I came back was go around to every place that I made windows to see the condition of them. And of course, we put storms on the outside of these. They have exterior glazing on them, which really protects the windows. Anybody that is involved in a church, if you don't have protective glazing on the outside of your stained glass windows, do it, because your windows, these virtually look just like they did when I installed them. How long ago? In the 70s.
78.
Sometimes the 78.
I've got pictures of you out installing them in a pair of shorts. For a price, we won't show that.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't have those on the tour.
Yeah. If you look at number 9, the Ascension, that's the unique picture. Being a member of the church, sitting there, and about 10:30 on a bright, sunny Sunday morning, the sun shines through, the light coming out of the statue or silhouette picture shows kind of white, but it is yellow and it is vivid. I mean, it will impress about anybody that takes a look at it when the sun is bright and hits it. The windows change. Some days it's overcast. Some days it goes from overcast to sunny back to overcast. And it's like a movie. They change.
So the lighting has been installed to illuminate these from outside so that no matter what time of day or night you come, you can still see a lot of that, the value portrayed.
Normally, during services in the evening, you can tell they're stained glass windows. And they may make some impression. But when we've light them up at night and the background is black, and now this light, we use LED lights, and it's amazing.
Make you cry.
Yeah.
You can't really photograph them. The human eye is just the most amazing organ because you can pick up all the nuances. And when you try to photograph them, certain colors bleed through, and you don't get the full effect. So if anybody needs something to do on Saturday night, it's well worth coming to see the windows at Central Christian. They're really, really something. One thing, when shortly after I installed them, I drove by the church at night, and the windows were all lit up, and I about wrecked my car. I'm going, holy mackerel, look at those things.
Yeah,
and I thought, who do I think I am making this, But I'm really proud of them.
Yeah, we're glad you're here and participating in discussing the windows. We're doing this one for the tour to let people know we're open, come take a look. But by the same token, we're doing this for generations to come. Hopefully, our grandkids will sit and look. Oh, that's my great-grandpa talking about the windows in that church. So, yeah, they're going to be around to hopefully for a long time. And the church is doing everything that possible to be assured that those windows will be there.
Mm-hmm. I'm just deeply impressed that we have the King Mansion in Marion, connected directly to Power Shovel and the time of the beginning of Marion's greatness, that we have the King Mansion, and then someone had the foresight to add a church onto that, the backside of that, and also the incredible foresight to see the value of putting those stained glass windows in the sides of those, so that people in the morning when the sun comes up and shines through those on the east side, which is what we're talking about primarily here today, it's just the value of the building, the value of the art, the value of the history, the value of the heritage, all of that is just on display December 9th, right?
Yes, and you are welcome to come, an open invitation, not only December 9th, but any Sunday.
Yes.
If you decide that you want to come and see the sun illuminate the east windows as the day progresses, you are more than welcome.
And so obviously everyone is welcome at Central Christian Church.
That is correct.
And this Saturday, they'll even be able to talk to the guy who made the windows.
Yes. And if you need some more information about, maybe you'd like to know more about the King Mansion, I think we can find some people that might be able to answer some of your questions.
Yes, yes. I'm literally overwhelmed that because as I'm learning this, I'm learning a lot of this for the first time, and that's why I asked you earlier to stitch together the factor of Marion steam shovel, which made it transition to Marion Power Shovel, and the man who was the brainchild, that's the brainchild of this man who built the mansion. The mansion is now a church, and it's still here, and it functions every Sunday and some other days also, obviously. I've been in there. Frankly, I've even given a sermon in that place, but I didn't know this. When I did, I'd have probably stayed around longer. But so give us some information here, the worship times, and so they know when to come.
Okay, we have a coffee hour. It starts at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. Church service actually starts at 10 o'clock, usually pretty close to about 11 o'clock we finish up. We are a non-denominational church at this time. We were in the past a Disciples of Christ church. We separated from that entity, and now we are, I hate to say non-denominational, but we are, I guess, is the most correct term to say that in that way.
Very, very good. And so, folks, you have listened to this, and I earnestly ask you to consider coming and seeing this Saturday, December 9th, at 7 o'clock. And not only will you be able to see this, but you'll also be able to talk to the artist himself. And so, thank you very much for watching this. And I am your host. My name is John Peterson.